Are you a fox or a hedgehog? This brilliant book, and really I would give this a 9 out of 10, by Philip Tetlock and Dan Gardner, seeks to improve our ability to forecast accurately future events. It seeks to help us better understand the thinking tools and methods required to anticipate with a greater degree of accuracy how scenarios and situations, economics, politics will play out and what the outcomes will be 1, 2, possibly even longer years down the line. So this book is all about trying to improve our ability to foresee events and how technology will change the world, how important questions, how wars and conflicts will be resolved, if they will be resolved. All of this is discussed in the book, and really the two authors clearly know very much what they're talking about. It just shines in the book their deep understanding of this area of psychology, of the science of how we think, and what the heuristics, flaws, biases are, and their effects on our judgment and our ability to predict with accuracy what's going to happen. The famous quote, "Many experts are no better than dart-throwing chimpanzees," that actually came from work by Tetlock. He, since the 1980s, spent his career trying to understand how we can get better at making accurate predictions, and he ran tournaments. He set up something called the Good Judgment Project. They have a website, you can check it out for yourself. And he compared the results. So people were quite rigorously, mathematically, scientifically tested on their ability to forecast accurately. And what he discovered was that most people were actually not that much better than simply chance, hence the dart-throwing chimpanzees. But there was a small group, maybe 1 or 2%, who consistently had a fantastic performance, had a unique ability that was so much better than everyone else's. And what they both discovered was that these individuals, they didn't have any special abilities. They didn't have genius IQ. The way they thought mattered. So rather like the fox, they were very versatile, they were very malleable, they were nimble, they were very curious, they would know often a lot, they would know a little about a lot. So they would have knowledge of lots of little areas, and this understanding of the complexity, their appreciation that the world is very complex, actually improved their ability to predict with accuracy, and they tried to find evidence that they were wrong. They were trying to falsify their predictions rather than what the hedgehogs often do, which is to try to defend their opinion. And hedgehogs they come at things through an ideological framework. They have a certain belief, and they find evidence which fits their narrative or their belief. Whereas the foxes, the superforecasters, were more adept. They weren't so clingy to certain ideas, values. They were much more objective and self-critical, and they really put their assumptions and their thought processes under the microscope. What they talk about in the book, one way to improve your ability to forecast is to break the question down into smaller parts, and then break those smaller parts down into even smaller parts. So they use the example of how many piano tuners are there in Chicago? That question is quite complex, but there was an Italian physicist, Italian-American physicist, who had a certain method whereby he would break that down and assign probabilistic ranges in order to ascertain, a reasonably accurate figure. And so in terms of that question, the first thing we would try to break down is, okay, so what is the population of Chicago? And if you really don't know, if you don't have Google available, you can say, well, okay, London is around 8 million, possibly. Chicago is smaller, maybe there's around 3 million people. And then you can ask yourself, okay, how many people have pianos in Chicago? Maybe 1 in 100. So then you divide 3 million by 100. And you continue along this chain of reasoning, but putting each step under the microscope. You then ask yourself, okay, this number of people in Chicago have pianos. How often are pianos tuned? How often do they need tuning? How long does it take to tune a piano? Therefore, what is the demand for piano tuning? There's probably going to be enough piano tuners to meet that demand. The correct answer is around 85, or nobody knows for sure, but it's thought to be around 85 to 100 piano tuners in Chicago. There are lots of questions like this where if you break it down into smaller chunks, this book really sort of carries on from the Daniel Kahneman tradition. Philip Tetlock and Daniel Kahneman at one point were colleagues. Daniel Kahneman's type 1 thinking and type 2 thinking. Type 1 is kind of an automatic response, a gut instinct, a feeling, whereas type 2 thinking is slow, deliberate. Let's bring this down and analyze every stage, scrutinize that stage, really try to pull it apart, assume that it's completely and utterly wrong, and keep going until you find something that can't be broken down into anything smaller, and then this is possibly a better way to proceed. It's called the Fermi method. There was an Italian physicist who recommended it to his students. But this is one technique of analysing important questions. There are other tools as well. So one is taking the inside and outside approach. So looking at something called base rates. So for example, the most common football score is 1-1. And I think the second most common football score is 2-1. So just if somebody asks you what do you think the score will be of two, let's say evenly based teams, those two scores are the most common. So those are your base rates. So predicting 4-1 is actually a much less likely outcome. If you look at, okay, so how many games have they played in the last 10 years, Team A versus Team B, have resulted in this score. So you can compare history, you can look at normal rates, normal outcomes, historical examples, to try to gauge, okay, what's a fair or the average over, say, the last 10 years. He does speak in the book. One of the things that really impressed me with this book is that he's not trying to, or both of them, but I have to say, it seems to me that this is more Tetlock than Gardner. But one of the things that was most impressive about the book was that there is a strong desire to be as objective as possible and self-critical. He talks about how, for example, Nassim Taleb would criticize his way of thinking, because in Nassim Taleb's famous book, The Black Swan, he argues that forecasting is a fool's errand because we cannot see the unseeable, the unknown unknowns, the black swans on the horizon, the very improbable but highly impactful events. Although Tetlock has responded to this by saying that, okay, we can still get better for most situations. In predicting most things, we can still improve, we can still get better, and by and large, the black swan is always going to be there. The completely unexpected events which renders forecasting almost impossible after a certain time period. One thing I really love about the book is that they do draw upon a large amount of research and a large body of knowledge, including chaos theory, and how, due to the butterfly effect, small, almost intangible factors over time can cascade and completely alter the course of history. There was a famous question by Lorenz, a meteorologist, who asked, can a butterfly flapping its wings in Texas or in Brazil, can a butterfly flapping its wings in Brazil set off a tornado in Texas? And he had to conclude that yes, he was looking at weather patterns, and he saw that if one were to change just one factor, humidity, out of a possible 30 factors, probably more than 30 factors, but let's just say there's 30, just change one of those by 0.000001, and after, say, 2, 3, 4 weeks, you get a completely different pattern, a completely different forecast. So what he is trying to do in the book is help us make better predictions, and has given a series of tools. He does, at the very end, give 10 tips of improving our ability to foresee the future. But I would say the most important one, just in summary of the points, is falsification and trying to find evidence that you're wrong. Assume that you're wrong and assume that you know absolutely nothing. And I think this is the best way to proceed, because it does give you the flexibility and the adaptability to actually look at what's occurring, because every situation in the world is different. There are always asymmetries. Going back to the football, one can never, with any high degree of confidence, predict precisely the score of a football match, because there are so many variables, not least, referee decision, which could go one way or the other. There's a lot of noise in the system. Daniel Kahneman also wrote a book called Noise, which talks about how our judgments can be very different depending on the mood, depending on the time of the day, depending on what's happened yesterday for the referee, whether or not he woke up in a good mood or a bad mood, the crowd and their emotional inputs. All of these things can affect the outcome in subtle ways, because a penalty choice might be 50-50. And a referee could go one way or the other. There's no hard and fast rule, subjective opinions. But I really do think this is a 9 out of 10. It is quite a complicated book to read. I had to go back and read it a couple of times because it's not particularly easy to digest. He writes it, I think, more for people that have knowledge in this area and are familiar with the work of Daniel Kahneman. But nonetheless, it's definitely worth the effort if you take the time to digest and understand what he's talking about. The things that he recommends: curiosity, active open-mindedness, getting a variety of different opinions, listening to people who you disagree with, trying to learn how they see the world, because they have information in their heads, that's going to benefit you. It's going to improve your ability to know what's going on and to be able to predict where things will go. For example, one way to accurately get a more accurate picture of British politics is to look at the Guardian's take on an event, on an upcoming general election, and then look at maybe the Daily Mail or the Telegraph. And then probably the truth of the situation, an accurate prediction, probably lies somewhere in the centre of those two opinions. And so this is what the book also predicts and recommends to readers, to think about gaining multiple perspectives. And the other thing is to get feedback. When you're wrong, learn from your mistakes. Don't just give up. Be persistent, and the art of practicing. Make predictions yourself. Write them down. Were you wrong? Were you right? what went wrong, get feedback, learn from the process, and you can get better, more sensitive. One thing they talk about is the super forecasters were very granular. They were very specific in their predictions. They didn't just say, okay, I think there's an 80% chance. They were more akin to 76.5% chance. That was a feature of the super forecasters. They weren't geniuses, but they were numerates, and actually their skill was honed and developed over a period of time. It sharpened by practice, by trying to make predictions, see where their flaws are in their own thinking, and improve. Okay, what can I learn from this? What did I get wrong? How can I improve my toolkit? How can I improve my approach to problem solving going forward? Wonderful book. I honestly think this is one of the best books that I've read on the subject, but do bear in mind you're reading two fantastic experts with many decades of experience in this area. So it's not an easy read, but it's well worth it. The other two books I'll quickly just recommend that are on a similar subject in case you want to improve in critical thinking, in skepticism, in being more objective, being better able to understand and predict the complex worlds around us. This is a fantastic book, classic by Daniel Kahneman, Thinking Fast and Slow. Definitely, if you haven't read this, I would put this in the must-read category. Brilliant book. Noise, also by Daniel Kahneman. Very interesting book. And then also The Black Swan by Nassim Taleb. By any of his other books, Fooled by Randomness, Skin in the Game. These are brilliant books and well worth checking out as well. So I'll leave this video with you today. Thanks for watching. Please do hit the subscribe button. It does help me out enormously. It means that I can keep on making hopefully better, more useful content. Thank you very much.